Morning, everyone, and welcome members of the public, local media, elected officials, as well as colleagues from the county and town of Cobourg. I'll be providing some prepared remarks this morning, which will be followed by a question period involving Mr. Larmer and myself, as Lisa noted. Today, the Cobourg Police Service, in partnership with the town of Cobourg Municipal Law Enforcement, is announcing a more focused and coordinated approach to addressing repeat harm, persistent disorder, and behaviors that negatively impact the safety, accessibility, and enjoyment of public spaces in our community. This initiative reflects our shared commitment to restoring order, improving community well-being, and ensuring that our parks, downtown, public spaces, community gathering places, and other shared spaces remain safe and welcoming for everyone. Residences, businesses, visitors, families, and vulnerable members of our community all have the right to safely access and enjoy these spaces. The Cobourg Police Service and Municipal Law Enforcement are aligned in this commitment. We're working from the same understanding of the issues, coordinating our efforts, and using the appropriate authorities and tools available to each of us. Let me be clear about what the initiative is and what it is not. Police are not the solution to homelessness, addiction, mental health challenges, or poverty. These are complex social and health issues that require healthcare providers, mental health and addiction services, housing and social service agencies, community organizations, and other partners. Some are well represented in this room. Community safety is a shared responsibility, and meaningful, lasting progress depends on collaboration. We believe strongly in that approach. Compassion does not mean ignoring disorder or harmful behavior in public spaces, and support for people experiencing complex challenges cannot come at the expense of the broader community's safety, well-being, or confidence in shared public spaces. Residents should be able to walk downtown, use our parks, support local businesses, enjoy community spaces without repeatedly experiencing disorder, intimidation, victimization, or unlawful behavior. Businesses should not be left to manage recurring problems on their own. Vulnerable people should not be left in situations where harm continues without a focused and coordinated response. That is what this multi-phased approach is about. The first phase that I'm announcing is about targeted enforcement. It's about restoring order. It's about balancing support with accountability. And it's about addressing repeat harm more effectively. As concerns were raised by community members and echoed through internal feedback from staff, we took a closer look at the issue and recently completed an operational assessment examining the direct policing demand associated with 5 prolific offenders managed by the Cobourg Police in 2025. The assessment was undertaken as a case study to better understand the cumulative impact that a small number of high-frequency individuals can have on police resources and the broader community. In 2025, these 5 individuals were associated with 919 calls for service. That represents nearly 5% of all calls received by the Cobourg Police Service that year, or approximately 1 in 20 calls to the police. Those interactions required approximately 815 hours of direct policing resources, which resulted in 42 arrests and 52 charges. The estimated direct salary cost of that police response was about $42,000. That is a conservative estimate and does not include a range of additional justice system, administrative, court, or associated costs that could not be accurately quantified. The point is not only the number of calls arrests, charges, hours, and dollars spent. The greater issue is what those figures tell us about repeat demand and repeat harm. A relatively small number of individuals can have a disproportionate impact on police, municipal services, businesses, residents, community organizations, and public spaces. While this assessment focused on 5 individuals, it serves to highlight a broader challenge. It illustrates what can happen when the same people, locations, behaviors, and concerns repeatedly require a response. If we continue to respond to each occurrence in isolation without considering the broader pattern, we should not expect different outcomes. That is why our approach has shifted. The assessment also showed that demand cannot be understood through call volume alone. One individual was associated with 287 calls for service himself, the highest number among the 5 people examined. Another person generated fewer calls but required the greatest cumulative police resource commitment, resulting in the highest estimated direct salary cost. The report also found that unwanted person occurrences were the predominant call type for 4 of the 5 individuals examined. This demonstrates that frontline demand can be driven by persistent social disorder, incidents, and chronic repeat contact, and not only by the seriousness of an individual offense. Not all high-frequency demand is criminal in nature, and that distinction matters. Some repeated interactions involved offending, non-compliance, public disorder, victimization, or public safety concerns. Others involve mental health crises, addiction-related concerns, or circumstances that extend beyond the traditional law enforcement. And in many of these situations, of course, several of these factors overlap. The common issue is sustained repeat demand that affects the individual, the community, public spaces, police resources, municipal law enforcement, and other service providers. We need to understand the pattern, not simply respond to the most recent incident. What the assessment also tells us is that enforcement alone is not the answer, but it also tells us that doing nothing or continuing to address each incident in isolation is also not the answer. We want to better identify recurring themes and concerns, understand the patterns of behavior, and coordinate the most appropriate response. That response may involve connecting someone to services. It may involve municipal bylaw enforcement. It may involve trespass measures or other law enforcement tools. And where the behavior meets a threshold for police enforcement, it may involve investigation, arrest, or charges. The response will depend on the circumstances, behavior, and the law. This is not enforcement for enforcement's sake. It is a more focused and coordinated approach to reduce repeat harm, restore order, and ensure public spaces remain safe and accessible. Compassion and accountability are not opposites. Many of the individuals involved in repeated calls for service are also people experiencing significant challenges in their lives. We recognize that. This is why officers will continue to use discretion, de-escalation, referral, and connection to the supports where appropriate. But needing help does not give someone the right to repeatedly harm others. Immediate residents or business owners victimize the community or prevent other people from safely using public spaces. We can be compassionate without being permissive. This initiative is focused on behavior, not status. It's about addressing repeat harm, restoring order in public spaces, and making sure individuals who repeatedly create disorder, victimization, and community impacts are met with a coordinated response that includes both support and accountability. Our coordination with the Town of Cobourg's Municipal Law Enforcement team is central to this approach. Municipal law enforcement has an important role in responding to these issues involving municipal bylaws, town property, public spaces, and recurring complaints. The Cobourg Police Service has a responsibility to respond when behavior becomes criminal, threatening, harmful, or creates a public safety concern. Our teams are working together to identify recurring people, places, and behaviors, share appropriate information, coordinate strategies, and apply the right tool at the right time, given the circumstances. Police and municipal law enforcement are on the same page. We share the objective of restoring order, reducing repeat harm, and ensuring public spaces remain safe and accessible. It's about using our respective responsibilities and authorities in a coordinated and consistent way. The community may have already noticed a more focused police presence in areas experiencing recurring themes. Our work is underway. Uniform officers, the Street Crime Enforcement Unit, and the Criminal Investigations Bureau are working together on targeted initiatives in public spaces while continuing to address drug trafficking, organized crime, and other complex investigations. As I have highlighted at the past 2 Police Service Board meetings, these efforts include proactive patrols, property checks, bail compliance checks, and targeted enforcement focused on repeat offending, persistent disorder, and community safety concerns. Since July, this work has resulted in 43 arrests and 11 charges or provincial offense notices under the Liquor License and Control Act, for instance. This coordinated approach, supported by our partnership with municipal law enforcement, is helping us identify recurring issues, respond to community concerns, and take targeted action where it can have the greatest impact. For the small number of individuals whose repeated behavior is causing harm, the response will become more focused, more coordinated, and more consistent. We will continue to offer help where help is appropriate. Where enforcement is warranted, we will enforce the law. That is our responsibility. Police and municipal law enforcement are only part of the response. Our next step is to engage or continue to engage with key health, housing, addiction, mental health, social service, and community partners whose expertise and services are needed to help address the underlying factors contributing to repeated interactions. We have identified the stakeholders who need to be part of that conversation, and as I noted, we've begun to engage with them. The objective is to strengthen coordination, clarify responsibilities, improve connections to appropriate services, and ensure each organization contributes within its mandate. Police will fulfill our public safety and enforcement responsibilities. Municipal law enforcement will use the authorities and tools available to the town. Health, housing, social service, mental health, addictions, community partners will be essential to addressing underlying needs and developing longer-term pathways towards stability. But I want to emphasize this point. Engaging additional partners does not mean that our action is being deferred. Police and municipal law enforcement are working together now. We are using the tools currently available to us now, and we will strengthen the broader partnership around that work. Ultimately, this initiative is about the people of Cobourg who want to go about their daily lives safely. They want to walk downtown. They want their children to enjoy parks and public spaces. They want to operate and support local businesses. They want to enjoy their town without feeling that certain spaces are becoming unsafe, inaccessible, or repeatedly affected by disorder. Everyone should be able to do that. That is what restoring order looks like. That is what reducing repeat harm looks like. Thank you. At this time, I will invite the Director of Legislative Services, Town of Cobourg, Mr. Brent Larmer, to speak about the town's role in this coordinated approach.
So good morning. Thank you, Chief, very much. I'm pleased to share specific operational enforcement activity updates on behalf of the town's Municipal Law Enforcement Licensing Services Office. Today, this date, we will coincide with the Chief's report today and elaborate a little bit more on some of the work municipal law enforcement officers are doing in line with our Cobourg Police. To begin first, I just want to thank our municipal enforcement officers for their dedication and commitment to the expanded responsibilities of the role in keeping our community's public spaces safe. Over the last several years, it has become increasingly clear that the traditional scope of municipal law enforcement officers has evolved. The nature of the calls we respond to now requires a more modern, professional, and highly trained team, one equipped to manage complex situations with skill, judgment, and discretion. Building on this continued commitment, our officers rely on a large range of legislative and regulatory tools to carry out their duties effectively each and every day. Some of those tools our municipal law enforcement officers use include the Trespass Property Act, Public Nuisance Bylaw, Emergency Care Establishment Bylaw, Restricting Public Consumption of Illegal Substances Act, as well as our Parks Bylaw. Specifically, our nuisance bylaw prohibits causing, creating, or permitting a nuisance in a public space. It expands the definition of nuisance to include illegal drug and alcohol-related activity and those nuisance gatherings, which is the gathering that results in disruptive or unlawful behavior. Over the last month, our municipal law enforcement officers are seeing patterns in repeated administrative monetary penalties, known as AMPs, being issued as a result of continuous illegal behavior in our public spaces after many failed compliance requests and repetitive behavior. Today, I want to share some data, operational data, with our community that our municipal law enforcement team has been tracking around nuisance behavior in public spaces. This data continuously being shared and worked with in the partnership with municipal law enforcement to that end result that we are seeing as we start to go forward. So from January 1st, 2025 to today, municipal law enforcement has responded to 3,148 calls for service. Of those, 595 files, which equates to 19%, relate specifically to nuisance type concerns, including nuisance, encampments, general patrol, noise, and parks enforcement tied to Public Nuisance and Trespass Property Act. That work can be broken down into numbers and translated into concrete enforcement action. To date, with those numbers, 50 trespass notices issued to repetitive, illegal, and non-compliance with Town of Cobourg bylaws and regulations. 73 code enforcement administrative monetary penalty systems have been issued, representing about $13,090 in generally uncollected fines revenue. And also represents approximately, and this is again a modest calculation, 600 officer resource hours dedicated to these enforcement efforts, resulting in about $26,000 per year in staff costs, and being deviated from all other enforcement activities across the town. In the month of July, so just passed, municipal law enforcement officers received 217 calls for service. The top 5 categories were animal control, parks, encampments, lot maintenance, nuisance, and parking related issues. Roughly 5% of call volume was directly attributed to formally defined within the DBIA boundary, converting to lot maintenance, property standards, noise, waste, parking, encampments, and nuisance behavior. When we broaden the scope slightly to include the areas associated within the downtown area surrounding the DBI, but including, that number jumps to 32% of calls for service that are concentrated within our parks, involving encampments, general patrols, and public nuisance matters. This is a more accurate reflection of the enforcement in and around that downtown core. There were 39 non-parking administrative penalties issued. 25 of those, roughly 2/3 of those, were issued within the downtown. And 76% of the downtown penalties were tied to public nuisance occurrences. The department has tracking concerns in the area adjacent to Trinity parking lot, including the James John and Chapel Street block extending south of King Street. And this is a targeted complaint basis from our residents surrounding that area. The concerns reported in that area include obstructed sidewalks, bicycle, skateboard, and scooter sidewalks, including reckless operation, public nuisance behavior involving alcohol and drug consumption, and public urination and or defecation, animal control and licensing issues, as well as loitering and littering. Municipal law enforcement officers are conducting frequent controls in the area across days, afternoons, and overnight shifts. Also, I want to briefly just mention our corporate contract security program that has just been in place for the last month. This is another partner in our enforcement strategy across the downtown core in a more concentrated, consistent approach living within the Municipal Law Enforcement Department. It operates under the oversight of the Municipal Law Enforcement Office in a more constant, consistent approach and proactive extension of our MLL team. I realize that our officers can't be everywhere all the time, so they help engage in more proactive complaints and a faster response time for municipal law enforcement officers in those areas that need addressing. So in the first month, the guards also logged 217 incidents. 175 were classified as minor, 34 classified as significant, and 8 classified as critical. Those included medical episodes, theft, fires, and intoxication. 77% of all incidents involved trespass and individuals being escorted off property. Another 15% involved public intoxication or drug use mischief, such as vandalism of property, damage, and littering. Geographically, incidents were concentrated in a small number of locations, including Victoria Park, Marina Ecology Garden, and the East Peak. What this data tells us operationally is often nuisance and public space concerns are concentrated within our parks, waterfront, and the areas surrounding the downtown core. Our enforcement and security resources are being deployed in these areas consistently and regularly. Continuing and going forward, our department is taking a zero-tolerance approach to repetitive nuisance behavior in our parks and open spaces. Municipal law enforcement officers are prioritizing calls based on reported nuisance activity so that our response is targeted where residents are telling us it's needed most, as well as partnerships in our continued effort in enforcement. Restoring and maintaining order in our public spaces often depends on residents reporting concerns through the proper channels so we can respond effectively and efficiently as possible. A reminder to community and residents that members of municipal law enforcement are available and working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and using a reported tool on the municipal website or a phone call can address the issues as quick as possible. MELEO, our municipal law enforcement officers, remain committed to using every tool to keep us, to Cobourg residents, and parks and public spaces welcoming and enjoyable for everyone. Now, as the chief has stated earlier clearly, our municipal law enforcement operations team are in lockstep with the Cobourg Police by working collaboratively in partnership through maintaining compliance, improving community well-being, and ensuring that our parks, downtown public spaces, community gathering points, and other shared spaces remain safe and welcoming for everyone. Closing, as the chief stated, I want to make this absolutely clear, the Cobourg Police Service and municipal law enforcement are fully united within this commitment. We operate as a coordinated enforcement partnership, aligning our strategies, sharing information, and deploying the full range of authorities and tools available to us, and each of us to maintain safety and order within our community.
I'd like to open the floor to the media that are present here for any questions that they may have of Mr. Larmer and I based on our prepared remarks. Yes, sir.
Yeah, 915 calls for 920 rather 5 people. It seems like that's there's a lot of, if I read the press releases, it seems like there's a lot of the crimes are getting through. We had discussions with the Crown and possibly the province still saying, hey, we've got a major problem with how this is being enforced. It doesn't seem like these people are understanding what we're trying to do.
That's a good question, and you'll recall I made some very specific comments about stakeholder engagement. I mean, obviously, the courts, the Crowns, are key to the success of this phase and those that come afterwards. But I would just want to bring it back to my comments and those of Mr. Larmer's. This was very much about the enforcement strategy. The phases to come will include further discussion, albeit it's already started, with the Crown and with the other key partners. And that's where we hope to see some improvements because, to your point, the enforcement's there. The response is there. The patrols are there. The activity is there on the part of the police and the town of Cobourg bylaw. But we see folks repeatedly being arrested and released in very short order.
The enforcement is there, but is it solving the problem?
It's part of the solution. The overall problem will not be solved by enforcement alone. It will require the sustained efforts of the multiple stakeholders that I mentioned in my remarks. I look forward to those subsequent phases. Others in the room have a key role to play in that, in shepherding that as the gatekeeper of those strategies, of which enforcement is a key part. And I'm going to argue at this moment in time, perhaps the most important piece, as we need to establish that baseline and restore order.
Some of the species that are pointed out, they're not quite unlawful. How do you separate these?
I'll take it a step further. I was out on patrol with our folks last week, and there are a large number of, we'll call it unreported incidents, which would not even have made the graphic that I shared. Our members literally go on a cycle of moving from one location to the next to interact with those that are part of the statistics that I shared, which goes unrecorded because it's what we describe as found committing or on view to a particular incident. What I'm saying is there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of calls that don't even make the official record because our officers are out there proactively engaging. So that also is a distortion to the stats in terms of enforcement action will often come out of those on-view situations that the public didn't even call us to. The focus here was on the calls for service and the amount of time spent. And you recall that the statement I made at the very end, that it doesn't actually, I would even say, effectively capture the man hours and the resources that are dedicated to this issue. It would be exponentially more than what you saw there for the reasons I've just described. Do I think that the public are, there's fatigue there? Yes, of course I do. I think people, by human nature, will see the same individual, the same behaviors repeated over and over. And some may have thrown up their hands and thought that there's, it's a hopeless situation. I hope not. I hope that people will continue to reach out to the police. We can't be everywhere at all times. We also have, as you know, CCTV in town to help us, other concerned citizens, member of the media for that matter, who see things and it gets reported to us. It really is a team effort.
Discussion on getting stakeholders. So it seems that you are kind of saying we're doing our job. We're at the end of the rope here. We need more help. When can you expect to see getting that?
I hope to come back here late fall, early winter to report on the results of what I'm describing as the first phase, which will be, again, reporting on the enforcement pieces that we've put into place or continue to support along with bylaw. That does give us an intervening 3-4 months, something along those lines, to have those key discussions. For me, just coming to the town of Cobourg within the last few months, it allows me to continue to meet with and engage with those key stakeholders as I've begun to do, and look for some of the leadership in those areas to take up the cause, because much of what I've described in my comments, don't need to repeat them, fall not well outside, but outside of our purview. We are supporting peace to many of the services that need now to come to the forefront. Morning.
Committees that are supposed to be communicating amongst these residents and the other volunteer organizations. There's a whole bunch of people out there who are saying that they're doing stuff, but is there a mechanism to report what they're doing and whether or not it's being effective?
I think the best way to demonstrate accountability in that scenario is, and this is just me without even talking to the other stakeholders, is some sort of larger gathering akin to a town hall where you see the stakeholders all present after a period of time reporting on their efforts, as the police will report on our efforts, as I just committed to in the fall, regardless of how those discussions go on the enforcement piece. That's where the accountability takes place. And then, of course, the published products that would come with that, the reports, the analysis of the efforts, which, to your point, becomes more challenging in some of those areas where it's hard to measure the effectiveness of certain interventions. But I'm getting outside of my purview. Those areas of expertise ought to be talking about how they might measure that. All I'm suggesting is there's a grander scenario, a venue where the public gets to hear from all those stakeholders together. That would be my goal. Whether that can be accomplished this year, I hope it can towards the end of the calendar year. If not, very soon after that. I think by then, the public should expect that we've had an opportunity to meet and come up with some deliverables in terms of a meeting like that. Not seeing any other hands. Yes, sir.
We with coalition and the free food handouts downtown.
I don't think it's anything that I'm aware of that the municipal government, police service, or others are doing to redirect folks to Cobourg. I really don't. I think part of the answer to that is that Cobourg, as the hub or center of Northumberland County with the hospital and the other services, seems to attract a certain segment of the population by proximity to the services that exist here that may not exist in Port Hope. I don't have an answer beyond that. It's not something that we've studied, but if we ever become aware of where services are redirecting to Cobourg, we would certainly be addressing that because we would like to be part of that conversation with the redirecting agency, but I'm not aware of that. Yes, ma'am.
In the public, in the public areas, will you be targeting enforcement to remove that service in those areas?
Targeted enforcement is intelligence led, meaning we have the analytics, we have the reporting, we meet with our members, we share with Port Hope, OPP, and others that are in the township on the results of our analysis. And our members know when they see certain individuals who they're well acquainted with, it's validation that they are where they need to be. And that for some of these individuals, like the 5, and there are more than just 5, but those are the top 5, there's clearly a story that goes along with them. And the members are expected, and they don't need to be told, they have their discretion. But for the behaviors that are repeated, and for those individuals who appear to be, lack of a better term, thumbing their nose at the police and the county/town, less discretion will be used. It is time that we restore order and that our members are well equipped with the information intelligence they need to make informed decisions when they come across these individuals, often in these public settings. Yes. I think it's a valid point. I'm not sure what role the police have in that. We probably have some in terms of identifying who those individuals or groups might be. We're not in the business of interdicting or stopping that kind of support or whatever they might refer to that as. But this will be part of the next phases of discussion. Having that feedback and that information is key to those discussions. Again, I want to bring it back to what today is more focused on, which is the enforcement component. That's why Brent and I are standing here. And we don't have answers to some of those particular questions because they're organically, naturally going to come up in the subsequent discussions moving towards what I hope is phase 2 and phase 3 of this strategy, because it's going to take months, if not years, to get this right fully. And that's where that feedback will be key. And I would hope and expect that at the town hall setting, and even in advance of that, folks in this room are clearly citizens who are interested and concerned would be canvassed for that kind of input for those discussions. Yes. Appreciate your feedback, and perhaps afterwards you could leave your name and contact information as well with Lisa, and I'd be happy to follow on discussion with you in regards to that. Thank you. We're at time. Yes, ma'am. One more question.
Yes, we do. Yep, that's right. Yep. Yes. Yeah, 90% is on the road. Yes. So there's 3 shifts: morning, afternoon, and night. So our regular daily shift is 8:30 to 4:30, sometimes 8 to 4, 4 to 11, and then midnight till around 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Yes.
When you need something at a time,
Yeah.
what number would we call? How would we get somebody to react quickly? Like an email sent about a situation, it's not going to get until maybe the day.
Sure. Yeah, there's 2 ways. It's the phone number. We have an automated call center that will redirect calls based, yep, to a priority. So almost like a dispatch for officers, and that'll go based on priority. Nuisance behavior is one of those priorities. An officer will be on, and they know who the officer is on that time. They can dispatch the radio as well as their cell phone too if they're on the road. The second piece is there's that report it function on our municipal website where you can hit bylaw infraction. And that will actually directly go into a shared municipal law enforcement general email, which they will be checking and utilizing at night. They have a full workstation within their actual vehicles, so they can almost do everything that's in office on the road as well too. And with kind of the activity in what we're seeing, the expectation of the officers is to be out in the road and doing those things and having feet on the ground. So sure,
Several people.
sure, yep.
They, some point, because they're not moving there, that the bylaw officer would be going right in the downtown court.
Sure, of course, especially those targeted areas.
So do they approach these individuals do something, or does it have to come in as a complaint from a citizen?
So they do it on their own, especially these nuisance related activities. And I just elaborate on the extension of our corporate security. So that allows us to have more eyes and be more proactive in our spaces, and they're there. So you'll see some of our targeted areas. There'll be a static security there, which will be able to monitor more and then call our officers right away as quick as we can. Yes. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Of course. Yes. And I think what we spoke to today with the police and municipal law enforcement operationally is that the police can attend as well too, as much. And then we have operational partnership now in regards to what will occur. It's not, oh, that's yours, you do it, I'm not going to attend, or you do that, I'm not going to attend. We're all attending, and we're going to address those issues collectively, collaboratively, and with every tool that we have, especially with those repeat individuals. And going to Carol's point as well too, is that this activity that we're seeing and we reported today is unacceptable in our public spaces. And those that are contributing to this behavior will also need to be addressed as well too. And we're working towards that strategy, and those results and those enforcement numbers will be something that we will report back on our phased approach. And well said. And we also, as the chief did address, is that there's more stakeholders here, and our municipality is going to be looking at how we can also get at those traditional tables. For example, at the Crown's office, how can us as Municipal Law Enforcement Department and those that are regulatory bylaws, not necessarily a criminal offense, but those repetitiveness can be a real concern for residents and those that are within the community. So how can we demonstrate, this individual has 12 or 15 nuisance charges? Well, that's now becoming a problem. And we have to look to the courts to say, how are you going to support us in addressing that problem? And that will be that third option.